Hi, my name's Ian Kinder with Live Safe Academy, and I'm very excited to introduce you to one of the few men that I call teacher, which is Lou Chiodo of Gunfighters Limited. And Lou, I'd like to introduce you, and I'd like you, if you could, to please talk a little bit about your background.
Sure. Good morning, Ian. Well, my background started off very early in life as a martial artist. I began training at about 9 years old. That's about 57 years passed since the first time I started there. And the significance of that is it gave me the ability to learn how to organize training, how to make sure that I am methodically taking someone through a training event so that we pick up on all the important points, but also organize it so that it's easy for them to understand and easy for them to go through. As I progressed through my high school years and into college, I was accepted into a Marine Corps officer training program. I received a commission in the Marine Corps and served as a regular captain for approximately 10 years. Upon my separation, I was accepted into the California Highway Patrol, and I served there for 23 years, working road patrol and also working within defensive tactics and firearms training programs.
And, I mentioned that you're one of the few men that I call teacher, and it's really been an honor to have the opportunity to train with you because you certainly influenced me quite a bit, but you've also made a huge impact on my students through the things that you've taught through me. And also, by creating this opportunity where students can train with you directly. And I'm really excited about having the opportunity to do this because in the past, we've done in-person classes, which have been absolutely fantastic. But the world has changed and we have this new technology that's available to us and new circumstances currently at this moment that really facilitate these live virtual training programs. But let me talk a little bit more about your background in regard to, I know you've had a big influence on your department and the type of training that they've done there. I know that you served on the front lines in the LA riots, and I think that's a really relevant thing to people right now with all the civil unrest and rioting that's going on. But then I also know that there quite a few officers have been saved by applying the things that you've taught them. And that's what our programs are all about. It's about saving lives. We're not out here to do the things that are commercial and trendy. We're here to do the time tested, proven things, the things that we know give people the best possible chance of success with the least amount of training. So can you talk a little bit about those things?
Sure. Well, one of the things that I would probably start off with is that my quest has always been to be able to produce the best type of training that could give a person a better chance of winning a live shooting encounter. Um, it started with me many years ago. I was a student of the teachings of Fairburn and Colonel Applegate, and then I was also a guess a very fortunate person that I had Colonel Applegate as a live mentor. Now, the programs that I developed were based on reality as opposed to, let's say, target shooting methods and some of the things that we see done in a lot of programs. It began with learning combat shooting at close quarters because that's where most of the people are going to be utilizing their handguns in real fights. So by producing a program that brought someone closer to their target, it allowed me to be able to develop the methodology of being able to rapidly engage a threat under the conditions present in live combat, because there's stresses that we see there that we just don't see anywhere else. So if a program's not developed around the reality of what happens to people both psychologically and physically at that moment of truth, then sometimes we'll see a lot of training failures because someone will try to do something that they were taught in training that really didn't jibe with the environment that they were in. So I developed programs for my department beginning when I started back in the early 80s doing this, and had the unique opportunity to be able to develop the program of instruction that went statewide. And my agency is a very large agency as compared to many. And I also then developed that program for use within my own company, which is what we would be teaching in this virtual program. It evolves around a step process. There's approximately 7 steps to get through the basic program. And it incorporates what I found to be the critical skills that are needed for live combat shooting, taking into account distance, what happens to people psychologically and physically. When you combine all of that stuff, you have to develop a program that's going to work for them. And that's what this 7-step process is all about.
You know, I'll tell you, a lot of what is taught as defensive shooting was developed on the range, for the range, looks great on the range, but it doesn't translate well to real circumstances. And you see that in police shootings, the national average for police hitting real bad guys in real gunfights is relatively small. And we want to do everything we can to give people that best possible chance under realistic conditions, methods that are proven, that they can effectively apply with minimal training. But I'll tell you another really thing that I think is beneficial is the training process itself, because it's not enough just to have the methods, but there has to be a systematic way that people can learn and become effective in those methods. And what I really like about these virtual classes is we're not only going to be teaching people how to defend themselves, but we're going to be teaching people how to develop those skills, not just on the range doing live fire, but off the range doing dry fire, using airsoft, using laser training systems, which means people now don't even have to be dependent on going to the range in the first place. Now, that doesn't mean we don't practice live fire. Of course we do. That's essential. But there is quite a few months where ranges were completely shut down. And in some places, ranges are still shut down. In some places, people really don't even have access to ranges under normal conditions. And of course, ammo dried up because everybody bought it. And when it is available and it's hard to get, it's very expensive. So we don't want to be dependent on these systems. We want to have a way of developing our skills independent of these systems, in addition to these systems. And I'm going to throw out one other thing here about commercial ranges that a lot of people don't realize. Whether you're in the military or you're in the law enforcement or you're a member of the public, for the most part, the only access that individuals have to train is going to be on a commercial range or a gun club. Because if you're in the military, the only time you really get to shoot is when it's an activity that's being conducted through the military. Individual members don't have access to the range on their own. And that's the same very often in law enforcement. So even if your department has a range, it doesn't mean the individual officer can go shoot on that range on their own. They usually only get to shoot on that range when it's a department level training activity. So if we want to do personal training, we're all stuck with these commercial ranges and these gun clubs, which is great. But we also know that commercial ranges and gun clubs are very restricted in what they can allow. A lot of times you can't draw from the holster. You can't rapid fire. You certainly can't learn to shoot in a 360-degree environment, or learn to shoot while moving, or shoot in low light, or have a target that's moving. A lot of those things simply can't be conducted in a gun range or in a gun club. So learning how to train off of the range with airsoft, with dry fire, with laser training systems really opens up the possibility of not only letting us train from home, which is convenient and inexpensive, but allows us to do things that we really couldn't do in any other way. And the virtual programs really set people up to learn how to not only use methods to defend themselves, but how to train those methods. So let's talk about that a little bit, Lou.
Sure. Well, the way the program is organized is that we're basically going to start off with the lecture portion. That would be the first week that we meet. And in that lecture, we try to discuss some of the aspects of the mental and physical things that happen to people in live combat and how it relates to the way that we train them to be able to respond in those particular situations. And this is pretty critical because I think the more that we understand about it from a perception or from the reality of what we study from real incidents, that's the way that we can develop training to incorporate those very critical things that we'll discuss so that it has meaning in the training. Because if we're training to do things one way that is void of all the physiological and psychological things that happen to people, then you may have a problem when you go to actually apply the training because it may be built on the wrong foundation. So that would be the first thing we do. Now, the step process is what we would use in this first sequence of training. We'll be doing step 1 to step 3. And what we're trying to do in that process is develop the methodology of what we call target focused shooting for close quartered combat, and develop our fighting platform, understand how it all works, and do it in a way that right there in your house, you can start to practice the methodology. As we know from other endeavors, whether it's martial arts, boxing, or any other physical type endeavor that is combative in nature, there's many components that make up a total program. Sometimes you might be punching a heavy bag. Sometimes you may be developing stamina type conditioning exercises. Sometimes you may be sparring with someone. And it's the same way when we're developing combat shooting. There's different things that are components of an overall program. And what we're going to accomplish within this type of virtual program is cover the methodology. And we're going to practice it virtually in a way that you can then convert the practice that we do to when you do go out and do your live fire. So the two of them will gel. You first learn what you have to do, and then you can go out and practice it. I'm a heavy proponent, as you know, of airsoft training. I train with it every day, and it has invaluable, it will give you an intangible amount of value at a very low cost. Around where I am here, we had virtually no way of going to live ranges. So every day I'm in there practicing with airsoft. Over the last couple of days, I've taught about 22 hours of live fire classes. And when I utilize the same course of fire that I'm teaching and that I've been practicing with airsoft, I was able to run the whole course. And at the end of it, still have all the rounds that I put downrange to where I could put my hand over it. All the rounds are where my hand are. Because I was able to utilize the methodology I've been training with airsoft and be able to convert it into live fire. So even though we may be doing this virtually and you're not putting a live round downrange, we're going to show you ways of being able to train with it that will give it great value. So when you do go live fire, things will start falling in place for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned like about boxing training as an example. There's a sequence of learning that applies to all models of learning. Like in the beginning, you learn the physical mechanics of the movements, your footwork, your stance, how you execute the individual punches. You put that together into what's called shadow boxing. That would be like dry fire practice and gun training. Then you go hit the heavy bag where you're learning now how to take everything you've learned and use it to develop speed and force and timing and balance and coordination and how to move with the bag. And that's just like doing live fire. And then you go to the coach and you practice hitting pads where now you really have to react because the coach is now doing things to you that you have to react to as you're hitting back and going through the different drills that they're calling upon you to do. And that would be a lot like what we call force on force drills, not actual simulated assaults, but structured interactive exercises where you're working with a partner and reacting to them, which you can't do live fire. You can only do using airsoft as an example. And then of course, in boxing, we have sparring, which for us in the gun world would be just like the simulated assaults. And then the real event for boxing is competition. For us is having to defend our life. But at no point in that training model do you stop doing any one of those steps. So you might start with shadow boxing and then graduate to the heavy bag, but you don't stop shadow boxing. You'll continue to do that for the rest of your career. When you graduate from the heavy bag to working with your coach, you don't stop hitting the heavy bag or shadow boxing. Again, you do those things for the totality of your career. And when you finally get in that ring and you practice sparring, well, you certainly don't stop working with the coach or hitting the heavy bag bag or shadow boxing, again, those are all things that you do for the totality of your boxing practice. So it's the exact same thing with gun training. And, it's nice because in the virtual classes, they're going to get a chance to talk with you and ask questions. They're going to get a chance to practice the physical skills and ask questions. They're going to be given systematic ways, homework, so to speak, of practicing in between each of the individual sessions. So when they come into the new session, they would have had an opportunity to get comfortable with and get competent with all the things that were covered in the previous sessions. And it's that progression, that structured learning that gets people to the highest level performance in the least amount of time at the greatest efficiency, so they're not wasting time. And I think that's really critical because people don't have a lot of time to train. But if they care about their safety and they make it a priority to train, then we want people to get as much benefit out of that training as they possibly can. And that's what these courses are all about. And the first one we're starting with is a 4-week course. So they're going to meet once a week for an hour at a time, 4 consecutive Sundays from 7:30 to 8:30 p.m. That's Eastern Standard Time. Now, Lou's in California, and I'm in the Detroit area in Michigan. So it's Eastern Standard Time, but that time allows people from anywhere in the country to participate and be convenient for them. And it's just a phenomenal training opportunity. I'm so excited, Lou, because like I said, I used to bring you here to Michigan. You'd have to travel across the country. We'd have to put together a big group of students to make it cost effective. And although we always gave students as much time and energy as we could, when you're learning in a group setting, there's only so much attention you can give to any individual person. It's not like a private lesson. Well, with virtual training, we have the ability to give people more time and attention than maybe they would even get in a group session in person. And we're not saying that in-person training isn't extremely valuable. It is. There's things you're going to get from in-person training that you can't get through a virtual course. But there's a lot of things that you can get through virtual training that will enhance your safety. And in some ways, that virtual format will facilitate aspects of learning that an in-person class doesn't facilitate as well, because you're concentrating on certain things that you're not concentrating on in an in-person class. So they really create this dual system of learning that really helps people develop their skills, become more knowledgeable, more competent and confident. Lou, do you have any thoughts that you want to sum up in regard to this first course that we're going to host with you?
Sure. Well, one of the things that I would want people to think about is that even if you've been shooting for a long time, we make a big distinction between shooting and fighting. So sometimes the concept, sometimes the positioning of the weapons, our fighting platform, as we call it, all work towards becoming a better fighter as opposed to a better shooter. So even if you have a lot of experience shooting, it's like everything else we do, even though we may have a lot of experience in one endeavor, there are other things that we can add to it to make us even better, or give us a little bit more depth in our knowledge and our ability to apply that knowledge. So, whether you're someone that's pretty new to all of this or someone that's been around a long time around weaponry, one of the comments that we always get from people who even have a lot of experience and a lot of time, either time on the job with law enforcement, or people who are, within the CCW or CPL community that have been around guns a long time, is that they wish they had been doing this when they first started. Because by the time you're done with the totality of the program, even though it runs on the concept of, like what I personally try to get across in all the classes, is that our goal is to perfect simplicity. Because when we're teaching any kind of combative thing, and in this case, we're teaching use of our handgun, there's nothing complicated that's going to work in combat. And there's nothing complicated that you need to do in your training. We don't need to be dressed up in tactical gear, cammied up, and, looking like we're going to war in Afghanistan for us to be doing the type of training that you need to stay alive in the type of combat that you're going to experience, whether you're on duty as a peace officer, or you're someone that is carrying a concealed weapon that all of a sudden is thrust into a life or death scenario. So regardless of your level of experience, the concepts that we're going to talk about may or may not have been included in that training. And what I have found, that I'm sure Ian's found too in his life, is that sometimes it can be the things you don't train, or the things that you don't know or understand, could be the very things that you need at that moment of truth where your safety's on the line. So what we do is we start off with the things that people really need to stay alive, and then we start to branch you off from that. That's what the step process is all about. So if you just go along with the process that we're laying out, what you're getting is a blueprint of training. It's the things that if you train these to perfection, they're the things that you are most likely ever going to use. That's the way I developed these programs. I went back into our agency's shootings for 25 years so that I could get a real good feel for what was happening to people in the street. And then I was able to bounce that data off of what we needed to put in training as opposed to what was already in training. And once that was done, and the gaps were filled in and the proper methodology was taught, it made an incredible difference in the survival rate in gunfights. It made an incredible change in the way that the bullets were now hitting the suspects as opposed to missing them. So this is what we have to offer, is basically a blueprint for training. Because I find that a lot of people just, they may be training and they go out and shoot a lot, and they burn a lot of rounds downrange, but they may or may not be doing the things that they really need. So what we're trying to do in this virtual program is lay out a foundation of training so that when you do go train, you not only are developing the methodology, but you'll know what to do in your training. And I think that's probably what separates what we're doing from a lot of other things that we see out there.
Yeah, I can definitely say that a lot of what I see on the range, whether it's a public or law enforcement, just doesn't really translate to real combat. I've been out to countless homicide scenes, and I can tell you that what I see at homicide scenes and what I see in training for both the public and law enforcement, just those two are very disconnected. And you can be a very good shooter and not be prepared for what's going to happen when somebody's trying to kill you. And we just want to make sure that people are prepared for, we're not, for if God forbid anybody ever tries to kill them, because that's what our goal is to keep people alive. Now, for this first course, we're offering an introductory price. It will not be this price again. And we are also offering an introductory price, an additional add-on option for people who want it, to have some private one-on-one time with you through a virtual format. And those are two things that we're doing now at a price that we're simply not going to repeat. And the reason why we're doing that is because we want to get this information into the hands of as many people as we can, because we know that once people have a chance to go through this format and see the incredible amount of value that they can get in the comfort and safety and convenience of their own home, that they're going to take that information out and encourage other people to go out there and get the same benefit for themselves. And that's why we're doing that. So look in the show notes of this video, see a direct link to this course, and also to all of our live virtual courses, including future courses with Lou Chiodo. And you're going to see not only a phenomenal program that we encourage you to take advantage of, but we also encourage you to take this information and share it with other people. And if you're lucky to be one of those people that are seeing this for our first introductory course, take advantage of that price, because again, it's not going to be that way again. And Lou, I want to thank you so much for coming on here and talking with me about this information. Thank you so much for being my teacher and personal friend, and the tremendous influence that you've had on me and my students. And thank you also for your service to our country, both as someone who was in the military and someone who served their community in law enforcement. Especially right now, it's so funny. Back in March, first responders were heroes. And at this particular point in time now, law enforcement is really coming under attack in a way that the vast majority of police officers do not deserve, because the vast majority of police officers are not only good at what they do, but they're dedicated to serving their community. They risk their lives to serve their community, and they deserve to get respect and support from the community. And I want to give you that respect, and thank you very much for all of your service.
Well, thank you. And I'm really looking forward to doing the presentations. It's a fun part of doing all this, is to be able to share it. So I look forward to it.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. You have a wonderful day, and I look forward to seeing you guys in class, and feel free to contact our school if you guys have any questions. Have a great day and stay safe.